And we're live, everyone. Welcome back to the Electrek Podcast. I'm Fred Lambert, your host. And this week, we again have a sponsor, Wonder Capital. So, Wonder Capital is the easiest way to invest in large scale solar energy projects across the US. With Wonder, you can help finance renewable energy projects while earning up to 7.5% annually. To learn more, visit wondercapital.com/electrek. That's wondercapital.com/electrek. So big week this week, and as usual, I'm joined with Seth.
How's it going, Fred?
I'm doing great, thank you very much. And we're gonna start off this week with what was pretty much the biggest news of the week in the Tesla world. We had an exclusive report on another shakeup in Tesla's Autopilot leadership, which happened quite frequently nowadays. I mean, that's like the third one in 14 months or something like that. Pretty close. Jim Keller, who better known as
we barely knew him.
You barely knew him.
Oh, he's there for 2 years. That's in Tesla terms. That's a long time.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And you probably did a lot of things in those 2 years too. But
Yep.
yeah, so what I was saying is that he's better known as a chip architect, so a microprocessor engineer. He was known for working originally at AMD, where he was a key to several of their chip architectures. Then he started his own company, or he was part of the PA Semi, which of course eventually became Apple's in-house chip firm, if you will, and they developed a lot of Apple's core technology there.
Yeah, and actually, like Apple's now kind of ahead of the game, ahead of Qualcomm and Samsung and the other chip companies. You know, based on the PA Semi, they've kind of leapfrogged everybody else. So I'm assuming the work he did there was pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, and of course he wasn't alone doing it. There was a whole team behind it, but he sort of became the most high profile of those of the engineers coming out of PSMI, which still appeared within Apple now. But he didn't last long after the acquisition from Apple, and went on to, I think, work from Samsung, and then he came back to AMD, where he worked there for the few years for their latest Zen architectures, for all their Zen chips. And then in late 2015, he came to Tesla as a VP of hardware engineering, specifically working on the next generation of Autopilot. So when he started out, we learned that he was working mainly to develop what is basically Autopilot 2.0, the hardware behind Autopilot 2.0, when Tesla was looking to transition from, of course, the Mobileye technology that was a big part of the Autopilot 1.0 to that new 2.0 technology, which of course a bunch of new cameras integrated into the NVIDIA Drive PTX custom board, and the sensors that come with it, like the ultrasonic sensors and everything. So he was in charge of overseeing that all deployment, as well as low voltage hardware, all the other low voltage hardware in the Tesla vehicles. Then over the years, his role sort of have shifted a little bit. So of course, the first thing that, because we've been following this story for a while, especially Seth wrote the first report back in 2016 when we reported it was ours, and of course we speculated that if Tesla is hiring sort of like this medical legendary chip architect guy, there was a real possibility that Tesla could develop their own silicon, their own like a system of a chip or something like that, and that speculation then started increasing once we reported that right after Keller was hired at Tesla, they hired a whole other team of chip architect, mainly for AMD, so people that work with that worked directly with Keller recently, and also Steve Bannon, who's going to be relevant in a minute. Didn't work with him at AMD, but he worked with him at PSMI. So he was also one of the main guy at PSMI when he was hired at Apple. But he stayed longer at Apple after Keller left, and was also.
Did you say Steve Bannon?
Did I say Steve Bannon?
I think you said Steve Bannon. I think you mean
Bannon. I made Pete Bannon. Forget what I said.
Yeah,
Pete Bannon, two completely different guy. One very smart, the other one not so much. So what I was saying is that they hired the whole team, so a bunch more of engineers very focused on chip architecture. So that was their experience. But at the time, Tesla still said that they were working on autopilot hardware. So that could have meant a lot of other things. But what we learned a few months back in December, Elon Musk finally confirmed the fact that Tesla is indeed working on their own silicon, their own AI chip. And Keller was leading that team, of course. So that was back in December. So we have to assume that was in the work for a while before it was made public. And that brings up to this week, to Wednesday. That was the last day of Keller at Tesla. And I should say that his role sort of expanded too in the few months before he left. When Chris Lattner left the Autopilot program. So Chris Lattner was sort of in charge of the Autopilot program after Sterling Anderson was the Autopilot program director for the longest time, until December of 2016. Then Lattner took over in 2017. Then Lattner was either fired or left, probably closer to fired, I think.
Probably.
And yeah. And then so Tesla changed a little bit their approach and hired Andre Caprelli. But Andre was mostly focused on the AI, like the machine learning, computer vision aspect of Autopilot. And so when Lattner left, Keller was sort of pulled in charge of the whole Autopilot program. So not just the hardware, but also the software in general, while Caprelli was more in charge of the AI and computer vision. And now what changed this week with Keller leaving? Keller is going to Intel, by the way. So that was we reported that on Wednesday, but that was late. We weren't sure 100%, but sources said that was Intel. Now it has been confirmed yesterday after Intel announced it themselves. And Caprelli will be in charge of the whole Autopilot software. And we were talking about Pete Bannon.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for the emphasis on Pete. Who's going to take over the hardware side of it. So it's not, I don't think like there's one single person in charge of the whole Autopilot program at this point. It's more Caprelli on software, Bannon on hardware. But that was the big news this week. Like
and it's hard to say how much of a loss this is for Tesla, but like if you're going to get anybody in there who kind of knows what's been going on, Pete Bannon seems like a pretty good candidate, especially having worked on Apple's, fairly recent chips, A5 through A9. That takes us up into I think two or 3 years ago. So Apple's clearly ahead of the game in processors. If this is one of the leaders of that group, then I think Tesla's in good hands. Maybe it makes sense to speculate what, do you think Keller left because Intel made him an offer he couldn't refuse? Do you think he left because Tesla was too crazy, of a job, taking up too much time? Those kind of things.
Like my sources said that it was completely amicable, like the split was completely amicable. And so the way I understand it, there were a few different reasons, but so Keller had a larger set of responsibilities at Tesla. So it wasn't just working on the microprocessor, like the next set of chips that's going to power the Autopilot system. He had more responsibility than that, and it sounds like he's more he prefers working on chips, on system on chips, and microprocessor related designs. And at Intel, he got the SVP job in charge of all that. So probably like part of it is, like you said, an offer hard to refuse, but also going back to just focus on what is most likely his passion at this point, I think. So yeah, my point of view is that it is a big loss because the guy is obviously a very good engineer. But like, of course, the shorts were quick to, another big executive leaving Tesla, and he's a very important guy and everything, and that's all right. I'm not taking that away from him, but like he also left Apple, and Apple is fine. Like,
Apple's doing okay.
Yeah, Tesla is 37,000 employees at that point. when a talented guy leaves, it's a bummer, but it's not that big of a deal at this point in the game. With this said, there's suddenly something going on with the autopilot leadership at this point. Like there was several big turnaround over the last year, and if you go back to the very beginning of the autopilot program, then you can add a few other, like when Robert Rose was brought in from space, not from SpaceX, but he was a former SpaceX engineer. Then from Vickers, he was working with Vickers, which was a firm that Elon Musk invested in, and he was brought in from that to the autopilot program lasted. So was in charge of the whole software of deployment of the AP1 version 8 when the version 8 came out, and quickly after that ended up leaving. Not sure it was fired or leaving. And then Elon even brought up his VP of software from SpaceX to lead the program for a while, and working with Sterling Anderson. And of course, that fell out too, with Sterling leaving, starting his own firm. And now I hear that Sterling even hired that guy. His name is I can't remember his name, but he was the VP of software at SpaceX.
Really?
So, yeah,
that's interesting.
Working at Aurora right now. He's in charge of software at Aurora again. Software Aurora is a very impressive staff right now. Like they basically had like the top guy at Tesla, the top guy at Waymo, the top guy at Uber as Uber self-driving program. Now they had the top software guy from SpaceX, and of course there are a bunch of other engineers who don't have such a high profile.
I guess there's so much money in autonomous driving right now. There's just so much money being thrown around, and it's such a Wild West kind of thing that, it's hard to stay in one place when there's like huge offers and crazy opportunities awaiting, the next town over.
Yeah, definitely looks like that. It looks like you just offer some everywhere. If you manage to add early experience in self-driving, and you understand, you have a good background in it, you're catnip for recruiters in the industry. But yeah, a few other things about this news that I thought was pretty interesting. So when it happened, Tesla ended up sending me a pretty extensive comment on it, which you don't always do when it's about an executive leaving. But I think that shows that they knew that Keller was going to be big news when he was leaving. So they had pretty extensive comment on it, and that included reiterating their commitment to making that AI chip that we're talking about. So I'm quoting right now from the statement from a Tesla spokesperson. Tesla is deeply committed to developing the most advanced silicon in the world, and we plan to dramatically increase our investment in that area while building on the world-class leadership team that we have in place. So the way I see it, like I said, after Keller joined Tesla, he helped recruit a bunch of other chip architects that are still working at Tesla right now. So they still have a big, a strong team in that front. And now they're saying that they even want to increase that investment in that team. And on top of that, Keller has been known to move around a lot. Like we said, we talked about AMD, PI Semi, Apple, Samsung, AMD, now
Right.
Intel, and Tesla. So he's been known to like work on a new architecture, a new chip architecture, build the foundation of that architecture, then just move on to another one. So it's quite likely that the base of the work for that new system on chip might be done at this point, or might be like very advanced. And so he decided that it's good enough to leave it to the team to bring it home, and he can move on to Intel. I think that's a very likely possibility at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Tesla's well on their way to chips. To go back to what you said previously about the autopilot turnover, I'd wonder, it's like a chicken or egg kind of situation. Is the slow updates to autopilot because of the turnover, or is the turnover because of the slow updates? I wonder which one it is, or if they're not related at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's even related at this point. Like, are the engineers just like frustrated from Like, are you seeing that the engineers are frustrating that they are not pushing enough update or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, the updates have been coming. It just hasn't been quite as fast as it was originally kind of laid out. I mean, clearly nothing really happens on Elon time,
Yeah,
but it seems particularly slow this time around, that or in this particular aspect. I mean, I imagine by the time the Model 3 was, kind of hitting its stride, that autopilot would be a major part of it. But for instance, with my Model 3, I'm not even getting autopilot at the get-go, just because, it plays a nice, it's great for long trips, but I
okay,
don't think I've,
not even the first pack, and not even the EAP. I think.
no,
Oh, okay.
I'm just getting, I mean, I kind of wanted to just get the base model anyway, but, you can always buy it later with,
Yeah.
extra $1,000, but, we will go on long trips in our Model X, but the Model 3 is kind of for smaller ones, so it doesn't immediately make sense to get autopilot, especially with it kind of not perfect. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And yes, we're mainly talking about like leadership moves. So if we actually count the people that left, like we cannot come up with that big of a number. So we're talking about leadership people. We've known about some changes, of course, at the engineer level within the Autopilot team. But I think those, like when we're talking about big waves of people entering and leaving the team, I think it mostly has to do with some changes in direction. So, for example, when Caperty ended up joining the Autopilot team and leading the AI and vision aspect of it, a bunch of computer vision engineers at Tesla ended up leaving in the following weeks and months. So maybe it's just like we know that the most recent important update in Autopilot featured all new rewritten computer vision machine learning algorithms. So maybe they just didn't need those people, or their expertise didn't match with the approach that Caperty wanted to take for the rewrite of the algorithm. So we don't know for sure. But so I really think that Keller leaving is not that big of a deal. And I know I'm going to sound like a Tesla apologist. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Tesla apologist. But like, he was in charge of the Autopilot. He was in charge of the hardware, and of course, the big part of the job for the Autopilot hardware was already delivered with the 2.0 and 2.5. He was in charge of the infotainment system, and sure enough, a few months ago, we had the new MCU system that was delivered. So it sounds like he did his job at Tesla, he delivered the new stuff, and now he's moving on to something else. And I think we haven't seen everything that he's worked on at Tesla yet. So there's still some fun technology from Keller I think I'm going to see coming out.
Speaking of moving on, we should spend some time also on the mobile app outage that happened this week. You wouldn't think it would be a big deal, the app no longer working, but I noticed in the comments that a lot of Tesla owners are just using the app to drive their car instead of actually having the fob on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done this in the past when I can't find my fob, or I want my wife to keep the keys and for the other car, and I want to drive the Tesla home, kind of an emergency situation. I'll use the app to start the car. But it looks like a lot of people are actually just using the app to start the car.
Yeah. Or some are joking around too.
Yeah.
Look at the first comment was, my kids needed to get something out of my Model S. I had to unlock my car using my key fob. It was all the way in the kitchen. Unacceptable.
Yeah.
So of course it's
that's
also
a response to other people.
Yeah, it's a first world problem for sure.
Right.
Tesla problem, if you will. But yeah, it was a big consequence. Of course, we all Tesla owner, we all use it pretty frequently, but it's not for essential things most of the time.
Right.
So you mentioned like you have the option of using the key or the app, and a lot of people were concerned about the outage, because the outage was quite long. Actually, it was like for over 10 hours for many people, like 14 hours, something like that. And the Model 3 is not the same thing. Model 3, you just have the card, and some people decide not to carry the card since it's mostly iPhone based on your phone on the mobile app. So they thought that was a bigger issue if you cannot access your car at all. But what we figured out is that it's not the app outage, like the link between connecting your phone to Tesla VPN, Tesla servers, wasn't the issue. Wasn't an issue for starting your car with the Model 3 and probably with the Model S2. So as long as you don't sign out of your account in the app, since it works with Bluetooth, it's not a problem. So the car by itself, without connecting back to Tesla server, or actually through the car to Tesla server, is fine. Then it just detects that your phone is near, and it's gonna unlock your car, allow you to start it. So not that big of an issue, but certainly a big event in the Tesla community last weekend. What else in Tesla? Oh yeah, just this morning we ended up reporting about we have a better idea of the links between Tesla and the Boring Company. So Elon Musk led a startup about digging some tunnels and building a transit system inside those tunnels. Tesla sent out a proxy this week about the shareholders meeting. Tesla has a shareholder meeting coming up in June, so that's where you have to vote on a few specific things. And of course, the one that caught most people attention this week, including us, is that they're going to vote on a motion, a proposal made by one of the shareholders who's an activist, a shareholders activist, who's trying to push the company in a certain direction. And at this time, it's about having an independent chairman, which would require Musk to step down as a chairman and Tesla to hire a completely independent chairman from the company. And he got the motion together, and it's proposed for the shareholder meeting, and it's going to go up for a vote.
Yep. And theoretically, it's possible that they would vote Elon Musk out of the chairmanship role.
Theoretically.
Extremely, extremely unlikely. And these kind of weird shareholder things come up quite a bit. And sometimes they make some sense. Sometimes there's a little bit of intelligence behind it, but often not. And, you got to report it.
It's a reasonable request to have an independent chairman. But like you said, it's not like sometimes the intention behind, but the way I find it is that it never passes. So even though there's something that makes sense inside the request, it just never. For example, the vegan thing. So they wanted vegan option. That was a big shareholder proposal that came up a few times over the last few years, and I don't think it ever passes as a proposal in the shareholders meeting. But Tesla ended up still listening to it and said, "Oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense that we should have vegan option to the car and everything," and they ended up doing it. Though I hear that a bunch of vegans are still complaining about the steering wheel. Have you heard about that?
No, but it makes sense. I get it.
It's still leather, right?
It's leather.
Yeah, it's leather. So you still have a little bit of leather on it. Other things like so it was mostly about independent board members first, and that was also a proposal at some point. It didn't pass, but Tesla ended up doing it last July. They added 2 people that are completely independent from Elon Musk and from Tesla. So now someone is trying to push it a little further and have the chairman position be independent, but the chairman position right now is held by Elon Musk. So it would be tough to move from there. Not only because he himself has a lot of control over the shares, but also he has a lot of respect from shareholders too. So I don't think that's very possible.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely.
Yeah. But it's there, and it's going to vote on it. And what I find interesting about it is the fact that it's going to be sort of a confidence vote for him, like sort of like a party leader being put up for confidence votes. Like because of the shareholder proposal, we're gonna get actually a number on the people that want to see Musk being chairman. Because
so we'll get a percentage if it's 5% or 8% or 49% or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something over 90%, maybe even over 95% easily. Because it's not like one person, one vote.
Right.
probably like Fidelity owns like 15% or something like that. They're gonna have all their shares to keep Elon
Yep.
and so on. But the other thing that was interesting from that proxy report is that because we're just talking about being independent from any conflict of interest, anything like that, and because of that, in that proxy report for the shareholder meeting, they list all the transaction that you have between companies that are related to board members and so on. So in this case, Elon Musk being, of course, chairman of Tesla and a big shareholder of Tesla, and being the founder of the Boring Company and a big stakeholder in that company, he had to disclose any transaction between Tesla and the Boring Company. So it's the first time that we learned that the Boring Company came into an agreement with Tesla to sell, and I quote, certain vehicle motor and battery pack components. And they expect that it will add up to about $400,000 in parts sold to the Boring Company in 2017 and 2018. So
some parts have already been transferred, probably.
yeah, because they didn't have to mention 2018 really, because that report is about 2017. So they're just letting you know that.
We saw a Model X. Maybe that includes 4 Model X's or something.
Yeah, I thought about that first, but then it says certain vehicle motor and battery pack components. So we're not talking about full cars, but yeah, the Boring Company has its own Model X for sure. We've seen that. We even seen it pulling like a mock rail car full of dirt and rocks out of the Boring Tunnel in Hawthorne. So they're suddenly putting it to use. But yeah, so what it's giving us, basically, it's giving us a better idea of what's the relationship between the Boring Company and Tesla, because we already knew that they plan on using the Tesla's technology, Tesla's powertrain technology for the transportation system. They said that at the presentation at the I think it was the Culver City presentation when they wanted to convince them to build their no, I think it was Hawthorne. It was probably Hawthorne. They wanted to convince them to let them dig under the city, basically. And so what was it going to be? Was it going to be like a partnership to build that sort of electric skate or electric sled that they're talking about, which is going to, now we know, is going to be focused on transporting pedestrians and cyclists, apparently?
Yeah, that keeps changing. The cyclist part kind of is a more recent addition. We saw that video originally, which was just Teslas going down elevators and through the system, and now it sounds like it's going to be more pedestrian and bicycle friendly.
Yeah, in that original video that you just referenced, we see sort of like a bus-like vehicle too that's getting inside.
Right.
And now it looks like the focus is going to be on that. And they updated that vehicle too. Like the in the latest video, they put a new concept, and that concept looked a little bit more refined. And it sounds like that's what Tesla's going to help build with their parts and component, but it's going to be more of a supplier buyer relationship. So Tesla's going to sell powertrains part to the Boring Company. Of course, right away, what do the shorts think of that? If they think, it's like a shell company situation where they move money between the company and everything. We're talking about $400,000 here,
right?
But yeah,
they just pile on everything. It's just it's so. I mean, some things, and this is their problem, is like some things they have actually like a good point on, like, like, can Tesla make money on cars? Like the big picture thing, really important. Can they get the cost down and the production levels up? That's a concern. But stuff like this, it just ruins any kind of credibility.
Yeah. It looks like they're just grasping at straws when they do that, even though they should maybe focus on the bigger picture. And it's so the fact that it's not a complete partnership with them, like developing the vehicle, I don't think it's going to be a big deal for Tesla at all. Like, it's just the Boring Company is happening. Like we just reported last week, they raised $100 million, and they have like 3 ongoing projects at this point, and they started already. They have I think miles of tunnels at this point already dug. So it's really much happening. But like how many cars or how many shuttles or whatever you want to call it, electric sled, are going to be out there? Not sure it's going to be a big business for Tesla. Still something to keep an eye on. And of course, we're going to keep an eye on the actual project because it's exciting to have a new transit system developing out. So right now we're talking about loops and hyperloops.
Right.
It looks like they're going to really develop their own hyperloop technology and compete with the likes of the Virgin Hyperloop One and the Hyperloop transport technology and all those startups working on their own system.
Yeah, I think Tesla's model is a little different in that they want to build the tunnels first and just have a kind of a regular.
You mean the Boring Company, right?
The Boring Company, yeah. Sorry, yeah. So the Boring Company builds the the loop, the tunnel between Chicago and the airport, and then somewhere down the line it can be upgraded to be a vacuum sealed one where you get the Hyperloop, but they're building these things first for like 100-mile transport, 100 mile per hour transport, and then somewhere down the line they can upgrade it to hyperspeed.
Yeah, it's probably a safer approach to both in terms of technology development and the actual deployment of the technology, because like maintaining a low pressure environment over miles and miles of tunneling and it can be very difficult.
Yeah, so the question begs to be asked then, if Elon knew that he would be competing in this field and building this stuff, would he have shared this and public the publicity he generated behind it? Would he have done that had he known that he would soon be competing against these companies that kind of took him up on this offer?
Yeah, that's a good point. But on top of it, like now it looks like he's himself having some cold feet about the own technology, since he has sort of the backup plan of having just a loop instead of the hyperloop, like we were just talking and starting with.
Or maybe he never came up with the how to get to hyperloop and make it a business, and maybe since the unveiling of it, he's like, oh well, what if we just make it a loop first, and then once the loops start coming in and we start making money from the loops, then we start sucking the air out and making them hyperloops. Maybe that wasn't obvious before, and maybe that's a business model now.
Yeah, and also there's the fact that at first he was also just talking about tubes,
right?
But potentially in the ground, but also mainly not in the ground. And most other companies went with over the ground systems,
right?
While the Boring companies seems to be building its expertise around boring tunnels, and then make it that tunnel's a tube that you can lower pressure in. So it looks like there was a lot of changes between the original design published in the white paper in 2013.
Yeah, that's how ideas kind of evolve, really.
Yeah, exactly. So you cannot count on it like staying stagnant for 5 years at this point. Like when was it started? It was 2016, 2016. I think they started the Boring Company. So 3 years between the Elon publishing that paper and starting the company, and now 2 years later, it's starting to be something real with $100 million in the bank. But yeah, we can move on to maybe.
Yes. So before we talk about the Gigafactory flyover and the solar, let's talk about our sponsor, Wonder Capital. Wonder Capital is a way to earn up to 7.5% back for putting solar in high value, high return places. So, obviously putting solar on your roof is the best way to get solar, but and get returns from solar. But not everybody can put solar on their roof. Not everybody has a big yard. Some people live in apartment buildings. Some people don't own their land. Some people have neighbors with big trees. Some people have solar already on their house and they want to put more in solar. So what Wonder does is they go around the planet and the United States, and they look for places where electricity is expensive, land and building and solar is cheap, and they find the best places to build solar where it's going to have the biggest impact and the biggest return. And that's where they put their solar money. And if you invest with them, you're putting your solar money there too. So you can earn up to 7.5% back. Go to Wonder Capital. That's WUNDERCAPITAL.com/Electrek. And we'd like to thank them for sponsoring our podcast here.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Wonder Capital. And if you guys are worried about losing your investment with your capital, like company going under and everything like that, you have to worry a little bit less about that this week or last week. Yeah, last week they got an investment in and a good 100 mil in their pockets. So a little something else to one less thing to worry about with
A lot of
more
solar.
capital.
Yep.
Yeah, they're full of cash.
Speaking of solar,
yeah,
the Tesla Gigafactory 1 flyover, our most recent one. So they haven't actually built any more like squares of the building, but they are
but it's
doing.
coming.
What's that?
But it's coming.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that was the interesting thing. It's going. Well, okay, I thought you were making the link with the solar on the roof of the.
No,
of
the solar didn't really. I think we had seen some other pictures, and the solar kind of started off, but it hadn't really moved much.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like there's just like two big rows of them, but like what I mean, big rows. There's probably a lot more rows, but from a distance, it looks like just two big rectangle of solars. It's still probably like a significant system installed there, but it's not the 70 megawatt that Tesla was talking about. It's gonna grow over time. But what was the interesting part about the flyover? So it's the first time that we have a good flyover since Tesla started moving ground on the northwest side of the plant. And what we learned when Tesla started doing that is that they confirmed that it's gonna be the new parking lot. And why this is important? Like, who cares about the parking lot? It's because the current parking lot is on the west side of the plant, and it's where they should be making their expansion, so expanding the structure of the building. So they need to move that parking lot and have a new one in order to expand, and that's what they're doing. Furthermore, what the flyover shows, and also the latest the latest satellite pictures on the west south side of the plant, they're starting to lay the new foundation for an expansion of the building. It looks like a small one, not as big as the previous expansion that we've seen before, like just a smaller one that still fits within the sort of roads that Tesla built around the Gigafactory, but the first one in a while. And of course, we know that the structure is just like a fraction of what it's supposed to be at full production. Like they're talking about only right now 33% of the structure is up. So there's still two-thirds of the building that needs to be installed, constructed, deployed. And of course, that comes with a ton of production capacity improvements. We're talking about we don't know the current capacity. That's a bummer too. Like I've asked Tesla a few times; they can confirm it, but we can link it pretty good to the Model 3 production. So if Tesla is producing 2,000 Model 3 a week, and they're all what are they? They're all 75 at this point. So 75 times 2,000, you have 150,000 kilowatt hours. So that's 150 megawatt hour.
Mm-hmm.
Or megawatt hour per week.
Yeah, and that's assuming no power walls or any
yeah,
of that
we're
stuff.
just talking about battery cell production turning into battery pack production. So that's 7.8 million per year. So that's 7.8 gigawatt hour per year. So if you add the power packs with that power pack production, you could be pretty close to 10 gigawatt already. Gigawatt hour production annually if you extrapolate to the an annual rate. And Tesla was talking about 105 gigawatt hours of production of battery cells production at full capacity, and 150 gigawatt hours of battery packs. So of course the difference is that Tesla is going to still import battery cells to the Gigafactory to make up the difference in the battery pack output. And of course, so we link expansion of the structure to expansion of that battery capacity, but we also think about what else Tesla could produce at the Gigafactory. So there've been rumors about the Tesla Semi being potentially produced there. No, not sure 100% like if that's going to be the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla ended up trying to produce a few more things at Gigafactory.
Yeah, it's such a big place, and I think it's inexpensive. I think the workers there are relatively, lower paid. Although I don't know if they're, to get the highly skilled people in Reno, I don't know if that's an easy thing to do. But I think the land's cheap. The electricity theoretically is inexpensive. it makes sense rather than putting it in Fremont, which is near San Francisco, which is quite expensive, or building a new factory elsewhere. Although there has been some talk about that as well.
Also, it's a cost of living thing, but
Yeah.
Tesla could do something like almost like it's you do your time at the Gigafactory. I'm talking about the engineers and stuff. Like if you're there to like set up a new production line and stuff like that. So we've known about like Tesla Grumman engineers coming down to Nevada to build up the production line and similar projects. So maybe they could just, in terms of the engineer side, have people rotate there for a while to set up the lines and have the core production worker living there like they already do. So that's an option, but we're just speculating here at this point. So we should move on to the Chinese Auto Show 2018. We're already 40 minutes in and we haven't talked about those cars, and there were many new cars unveiled this week at the show, mainly for the Chinese market. So we know that China has been very good at optimizing the local production of EVs to bring up more foreign automakers building new cars in the country. And we started out we're not going to talk too much about the Mercedes-Maybach, the new luxurious series unveiled, because I don't think that's going to be an actual car.
I hope not. It doesn't. I mean, as far as Maybachs are concerned, it doesn't like. There's some really beautiful Mercedes-Maybach cars, and I don't think this is one of them.
Well, the interior is pretty crazy.
Yeah, the interior is nice.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say nice. Maybe it's like bright and white, and I don't know. It's some people
it's for the
like
Chinese market. Like the way I see it, it's for the Chinese market. So I know Chinese are big on specific colors and red. So the concept was red for exterior and white.
A lot of rose gold, and of course the back seats are where all the luxury is.
They say that the back seat are made for being driven. So the car is not made around the driver, but it's made about being chauffeured around as a passenger. So that's also a big thing with the rich Chinese people and rich people in general. I mean, I'm not gonna stereotype the Chinese. If you're rich, you don't have to drive. But yeah, they did confirm like specs for the battery pack, which are not crazy especially for a concept car. So oftentimes like automakers will unveil a concept car and just say, oh, we have like those crazy specs, and of course it's just because the car is never going to exit, so no one's going to confirm those specs or not. But in this case, they talked about a pretty significant all-wheel drive electric motor system with 550 kilowatts, but somewhat reasonable 80 kilowatt hour battery pack for this size of, I want to say SUV, but pretty much a crossover. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're gonna move on to actual cars that are they were unveiled as concept at the show, but they are aimed at production. So we're gonna see production version of those cars, starting with first time we see the BMW iX3. So that was a car that we were anticipating for a while.
I think it'll be extremely popular. I hope it comes stateside soon. Like I think the sooner that BMW can get it into the US, it would be better for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's going to be stateside for sure. The way BMW has been talking about it, it's going to be the next mass-produced electric vehicle in their lineup. Mm-hmm. But since it was unveiled in China, they talk specifically about the Chinese market. So with their joint venture BMW Brilliance, they're going to produce it directly in China too. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be produced at BMW's other plants around the world. And it looks pretty much like an X3. Like if you're familiar with BMW's flagship SUV, nothing's going to surprise you in terms of the design. Of course, it's a concept vehicle, so they add like the electric accents, design accents, and of course the covered wheels too. But it's not the BMW i3, so it's not going to have the crazy weird mobile design of the i3. They went something more conventional, and they released some specs for the powertrain. So we're talking about a 200 kilowatt motor. We're talking about a 70 kilowatt hour battery pack. What they said about the term of range, they quoted a WLTP cycle for 400 kilometers, 250 miles. which is
Okay.
not bad for 70 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, a little similar to the Model X, probably a little bit. It'll probably be similar to the Model Y.
Yeah, in terms of size, it's definitely smaller than Model X, but much smaller than Model X.
And also it's nice to see 150 kilowatt charging.
Yeah,
That seems to be like the new standard. The baseline of new cars coming out.
yeah. If you look at
So
the Audi Quattro, that's the same
right.
thing. And I think that the Audi Quattro is going to be a competitor to this car,
Mhm.
like size-wise, like segment-wise, it's going to be a competitor.
Yeah, it's good to see. I mean, it's good to see these luxury players coming out. Yeah, this also obviously is going to be similar to the iPace.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, same segment too.
so, and a little news on that. I think I'm allowed to share that we're going to go to, or I'm going to go to Portugal
Yeah, not
uh,
say we. Don't tease me with
ne-
the we.
next month to test drive the iPace, which will be very exciting, and I'll do a lot of video and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
gonna have a full report on Electrek about the Set's experience with the iPace, which is a pretty exciting vehicle. I think I'd venture to say more exciting than that iX3 right now. A
yep.
little bit. I'm more pumped for it than for especially since they confirmed those specs, and that car's not coming until 2020. So
Yeah, this car is actually here
Mhm.
now, so
Well,
that's.
it's not for but it's for sale. You can reserve it, but it's not
I
in
mean,
the
it's actually
dealerships yet.
physical, like you can touch it.
Yeah, yeah, you can
It's
drive it
not a.
definitely. Yeah, the big unknown, of course, for the iX3 is the price. They haven't confirmed any pricing information, and that's going to be a big problem. Well,
So
I,
the
I,
X3 costs 43,000. How much
yeah,
more could this cost? This.
that's the big question. Yeah, because that's a big pet peeve of mine when they do those cars that are based on existing gas powered cars. Because of course, people's going to compare it to the gas powered version. I mean, people that are not necessarily looking for an EV. If you just go to the BMW dealership, I want a new SUV. And I've heard that you have a new electric version of the X3. And oh yeah, here it is. Oh, it looks just like the X3, and I don't have to pay for gas. No, you don't have to pay for gas. And charging station, I think we're gonna see more charging station, right? Yeah, you're gonna see more charging station. How much the price? Oh, about twice the price of the X3 with gas for gas. Oh, okay, forget about it. I'm not gonna buy it. So that's I've been like, something that happens a lot with like if you look at the e-golf something like that, and of course incentives have sort of mitigated the situation for a while, but they're not going to be around for forever, especially not in 2020. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to be a concern. If they come out like something at $80,000, I think it's going to be a flop. But if they get out something closer to maybe 55, 60 max, because I don't think people would pay the same like since Jaguar went with the new model, even though it's still like similar to them. They have a few SUVs in the segment and everything like that.
Yeah, the F Pace.
Yeah, they have the VFP that
I
is
wonder if they're going to start. I mean, I always hear people talking about leasing the batteries. Like you buy the car, but you lease the battery, and
specific for the I-Pace.
not for the iPace or anything
Mm.
specifically, but I know that it's an idea of mitigating the cost because you're paying less for gas, but
Mm-hmm.
you know theoretically you would pay the same monthly, but you lease the batteries, and therefore you're not paying this. You don't have the sticker shock of like
Yeah,
this is an $80,000 car, the gas version's 40,000. Well, what if the battery costs $40,000 or whatever, $30,000? What if you pay the same upfront cost as a gas car, but you actually lease the battery in the same way that you're putting gasoline in the car?
yeah. Zoe, Renault had success with that particular structure with the Zoe.
Right.
So not impossible. I don't think it goes as well for the higher hand of the market though. I think someone, of course, if you can package it as a lease and you lease the car too, and not just. But in terms of buying, you said like you talked about the sticker price shock. I think like they want to still like they want to if you want to buy it, it's not going as well. But I think technically the iX3 should be cheaper than the I-Pace. I think specifically you talked about the battery pack having a difference on the price. That has like a 30% smaller battery pack or not smaller, like less energy, less energy capacity in it. So technically it should be significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that means that depends. Are they going to be mass produced? That's another thing. You could make a lot more of those iX3 than Jaguar plans on making high pace. I don't think Jaguar plans over 20,000 high pace per year. They're not making them themselves anyway. And
Right. And Google already bought 20,000 of them. So
yeah, that's another thing too. They bought 20,000 over 4 years or something like that. So that's like 25% of the capacity for a while. But yeah, then I looked up how many i3s they were making per year. But I mean X3. But anyway, it's a big vehicle program for them. So if they go
yeah,
with an electric one,
an X3 is not a premium SUV for BMW. It's a kind of lower end, kind of RAV4 type of.
yeah, still 43,000 though. But
Yeah. I mean, BMW $43,000 car is kind of their low end.
yeah, I think it's 100,000 per year in the US. Is it that much, or 50,000 per year in the US, 50,000 per year in Europe?
I don't know. That sounds like quite a bit, though. If
Yeah,
they're
maybe 50,000 in each market, something like that. But anyway, we're running out of time, so we're gonna have to move quickly over the next news. So another car that was unveiled for China, but this one is really it's gonna go to production, but it's gonna be just for the Chinese market. Is the Nissan Sci-Fi Zero Emission? Is that how you would pronounce it? Sci-Fi?
Are you talking about the Nissan or the Volkswagen?
The Nissan.
Oh yeah, the Nissan. It's basically a Leaf.
Yeah, it's a Leaf, but they call it it's a Leaf-based vehicle.
Right.
It looks pretty much like a Leaf, but a little bit different form factor. So it looks more like a sedan. Doesn't have the same hatch at the back. It looks a little bit smoother. Probably is gonna have better aero. I think aerodynamic performance.
I'm not a big fan of Nissan's designs, sadly.
Yeah.
I like their effort. It just like their cars are, for me personally, very uninspiring. So it's hard to get excited about this. It's good that they're building electric cars for China.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big news I think for that is that they said it was going to be a mass-produced car in China. So I think if they can mass-produce that in China and make it relatively cheaper, it's going to increase the deployment of EVs in the country, which is always good. And few interesting points. They talked about the powertrain. They didn't talk about the specs of the powertrain beyond confirming a range based on Chinese standards of 338 kilometers,
which is 210 miles, which is quite a bit more than the US or Japanese Leaf.
Yeah, so that's the concern. So is it the same 40 kilowatt hour battery pack that they are producing for the new Leaf? And if so, like, how do they account for the difference? Is it just because of this Chinese standard that it's going to be different? Is it because of the new form factor being more efficient? So they left a lot of question unanswered at this point. But just so you know, there's going to be a Leaf-based vehicle in China for sale soon.
Yeah.
And now you just mentioned the Volkswagen. So Volkswagen with its JAC Volkswagen is the joint venture in China. They unveiled a new sort of small SUV.
Is that an SUV?
Well,
it looks like a e-Golf to me a little bit.
They're calling it an SUV, but yeah, maybe like a crossover would be more fair. But yeah. It's not a new car, actually. It's not even a new car. So GAC, do you see GAC? Or do you see Jack? Or I don't know, like the company without the partnership with Volkswagen already had the same car. Like it's the IEV 7S, and now they pretty much just rebranding it and increasing the production to sell it under the GAC Volkswagen brand. The car has about 200 kilometers of range or 125 miles. Nothing impressive about it. Just like very basic SUV. The most impressive thing is probably the price.
Yeah.
120,000 yen, which is about 20,000 US, 19,000 US.
Yeah, under 20,000, which includes. So this was my mistake. Initially, I thought it was 19,000 without subsidies, but that includes Chinese subsidies, which I'm not exactly sure how much.
They were significant, so it could be as much as like $8,000 or $10,000. So
okay, so that's big deal.
Mid-20s to early 30s. So like you said when I told you that, your reference, like it's the same, pretty much the same price as the Leaf, which is fair. But it's like I said, SUV form factor is maybe stretching the truth a little bit, but probably a bigger car. I think it's a bigger car.
Yeah, now that I'm looking at other pictures of it, I mean, the front, it looks like kind of like a Golf, but it's higher.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
higher. Yeah, for sure. And
uh,
the back seat looks bigger too. Like the second door looks bigger.
yeah, I mean,
More space.
at under $20,000, that would be a pretty nice vehicle stateside in the U.S. and North America and Canada. Like, it's kind of baffling to me why. I mean, I know the reason is because batteries are so expensive, and it's the chicken or egg with the batteries and the production and getting the numbers up where you can get the prices down. But I wonder how a car company could do if, I guess maybe the Hyundai Ioniq is a good example where they
Hmm.
have a 28 kilowatt hour battery and they got the price down, I think 28,000 before incentives.
Incentives.
So you're looking at 20,000 after the federal incentives, and then if you live in a kind of a CARB state or a ZEV state, you're looking at another $2,000 or $3,000 off. So that brings it down to 17,000. That's a pretty good price for a car. I
The
mean,
same
obviously,
mileage, pretty much.
what's that?
Pretty much the same mileage too. Yeah, 125 miles. That's what the Hyundai gets.
Right.
Gets like not all the time, but if you're good
Yeah,
with
the
driving,
Ioniq's kind of like, a Prius-y, an older Prius-y looking car, where this is like an SUV. I think it would probably sell quite a bit better.
mm-hmm.
Maybe the Kona will come down a little bit um, further down the road, but it's just like for the people who want a low priced SUV, which is like the big market right now in the US, there's not really a good answer in the
Yeah,
electric world. And I guess that's what the Model Y will kind of hit, hopefully.
yeah, yeah. We don't have any news this week about the Model Y, but in the next few months, I wouldn't be surprised if we start having more details about it. Moving on, we have a few quick charging news. So this morning we reported on a bunch of Canadian cities getting new curbside electric vehicle charging options for to enable urban EV ownership, basically. And I think that's very important because when often when I talk to people about EVs and people who don't have EVs, and of course it quickly comes on the subject of you should have an EV. Like I'm pretty much a salesman for all electric vehicles out there, and most of the time, though, so when people come back with their argument, oh, the range is not good enough or whatever option, like it's too expensive or whatever. Most of the time, I have an argument to come back and convince them. The one thing that I have trouble coming back with is if they tell me I live in an apartment, I have street parking, then I'm like, right, okay, it's a little bit more difficult, and you have to try to convince them about like, oh, you're gonna need to find a new parking in the garage that has charging, so that's another expense. Then you have, maybe you can go every week to a charging station, a quick charger, and leave the car there for a while and do your shopping, whatever, and come back. And yeah, but then you need a car with a longer range to do that. So it is just too difficult. So a big thing I think for EV adoption is going to be to try to find a solution to that. So try to find a solution to urban EV ownership. And I think a big part of that is going to be curbside charging. So car charging directly from the street. So if you have street parking, you can just plug your car overnight, no matter what. And that's actually an important thing for level 2 charging. So I know that's a big pet peeve of set to uh, charging network being deploying level 2 charger where they shouldn't. Like then I often hear you complain about that.
Yeah,
Right.
so this is good. I mean, on the side of the road where you're parking overnight at stores, like we're going to talk about Target in a second,
Mm.
Walmart, level 2 doesn't really make quite as much sense because, you're driving, theoretically 10 miles. You're staying there for an hour at the most, maybe like a half hour. You're not even going to recoup that 10 miles. So level 2 charging at stores doesn't make sense, but curbside makes quite a bit of sense. The question is, though, are these like only for electric vehicles, these spots? Because spots can be at a premium.
Yeah.
And then are you getting iced because somebody's like, hey, that's an open spot and nobody's parked here, so I'm going to park here?
Yeah.
So
So
how do you avoid that, I guess?
yeah, that's a good question. And we're talking about like, so the project specifically is 100 new curbside charging stations. So that's going to be there's 2 plugs per station. So there's going to be like 200 parking spaces that's going to be reserved for electric vehicles. It pretty much has to be reserved, I think. Otherwise, it's just like
What's the point?
It's a big investment that you don't. It's going to be hikes all the time, so you're just going to use your investment in it. And it's backed by Natural Resources Canada, so it's a federally funded project for 6.7 million that they were putting in it, and it's going to be deployed by Add Energy, who already have a similar network deployed in Montreal, because they're based in Quebec, so they managed to have a deal with the city of Montreal, and they deployed already hundreds of stations there in Montreal. So they already have the design for that curbside, and the design is pretty good. Like the way they did it, it's like they put the cable very high on it, so no matter what kind of car that you have, you're going to be able to plug it, even though the parking, because it's street parking, it's not necessarily, they don't have necessarily lines on everything, so the cars can be parked very differently. So it's good to have a system that can reach easily to your plug and everything. And now it's gonna be in London, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Surrey. Vancouver's already deployed, and now they're looking to deploy the rest over the next year. And full disclosure, my dad works for the company that we're talking about, Had Energy, but we reported on that completely independently. Like no one asked us to report on it. My dad didn't even tell me about it.
It would have been nice if they had sent something along, so we didn't have to find it on the newswires. But
yeah,
that's
I got it on the newswire first, but I still asked my dad for can you connect me to someone that get the pictures, because we didn't have any good pictures of it, so I still use my contact at the company. But yeah, it's just very newsworthy either way, so worth posting, I think. And not the only charging news this week.
Target.
So Target announced a bunch of partnership with both with the Tesla, with ChargePoint, and with Electrify America. So 600 new charging station that's going to be deployed at over 100 stores in the US. And so they already have a few Tesla supercharger at Target's locations. They already have a few ChargePoint locations at the Target stores. Now they're gonna add both of those. They're gonna add their network of Tesla and ChargePoint chargers, but also Electrify America. And what is interesting about Electrify America is just last week they announced a partnership with Walmart. So now they are in Walmart, and they're gonna be in Walmart, and they're gonna be in Target. So
I mean, so this goes back to my whole charging thing. Like, level 3 makes some sense at Targets. Most people who have electric vehicles, they drive 10 miles to Target, then shop, and then drive 10 miles back or do whatever. And by the time they get home, they're still like, have 90% of their gas or 90% of their electricity. However, there are people who are driving from city to city or who've been driving around town all day that need a charge. And if you are going to be charging, it's nice to have a option like Target. It's nice both for Target and for the people to go do your shopping and get some coffee or that garbage pizza they serve or whatever. Having that there is great for Target, because you have this audience that has to do something, and then for the drivers as well, because you've got to be there for 20-30 minutes. You might as well get your shopping done. So I think it's a great thing. I just hope that these targets that they're choosing are targets that are close to freeways, where a lot of people are doing these long distance commutes or long distance traveling, and can pull off the side of the road and use them for, because people who just have like a Tesla and are, their local Target aren't going to use these things. It's just not worth it.
No. So yeah, it all depends on which one are they going to deploy. Like they're going to deploy the Tesla supercharger at some that are more specifically close to highways. Then maybe the charge point can be level 2, and so charge point also have DC charger, of course. So it could be all 3 of them, all having different solution everywhere. So I think as long as they are smart about it, it's a very good announcement. We're gonna roll the 3 other real quick. So Tesla's also rumored to potentially join the Ionity network in Europe. If you remember, the Ionity network is a big ultra fast charging network currently being deployed in all over Europe. It's mainly BMW, Mercedes, Ford, and all the Volkswagen brand, but now a bunch of other automaker, including Tesla, Volvo, Fiat Chrysler, PSA, Opel, Jaguar, Land Rover, apparently they are all in talks. So that's from reports coming out of Germany that name people from the industry. So Tesla didn't want to comment on it when I reached out to them. So probably it's the case. Probably they are in discussions about it, but it could be very early discussions. It might not happen at all. Still something cool to think about, that we might have a very big coalitions of automaker joining the network. Moving on, Ford. Quickly, Ford has announced the phase out of almost all passengers vehicles, all their sedans and stuff like that. They're going away with after the current generations. They're going to focus on trucks, but they still have plans on electric vehicles. They didn't announce any new plans on electric vehicles. They just reiterated their plan to have 16 new BEVs over the next 4 years.
Which sound like they're going to be trucks or not cars.
Yeah, well, so that's where it's not 100% clear, because it says like they're phasing out the current passenger car program. So maybe there are new programs that are EVs and they're not necessarily trucks. They could be sedans. It's just like all their sedans going to be electric or something like that. So it's not 100% clear. But what we know for sure is that their first EV is going to be in 2020, the all electric CUV. So it's going to be like a crossover with 300 miles of range. Like I said, I think Ford is just far behind in EVs right now. The first EV in 2020, first EV that's not a compliance car is going to be in 2020. That's very late. And with their focus on trucks, I think they should just go ahead and be the electric truck manufacturer guy. Like, the truck is your thing, then do the electric truck.
Right.
And they're not doing it.
I mean, they're keeping the Mustang, and there's going to be this new one that's the Active, I think they're calling it. So what my takeaway from this is, like, Chevy, they're getting rid of their cars. They just announced they're discontinuing a couple cars. Ford's getting rid of their cars. Fiat, FCA, they don't even have cars. They're just minivans and Ram trucks. So, like, who's buying where are all the car buyers going? And, like, one thing is there's 500,000 not 500,000 in the US, but 500,000 globally car buyers waiting in line to get Model 3s. That's maybe a few, car buyers there. But, I think just generally speaking, people want to be higher up on the road. Energy, like gas or electricity, isn't too expensive relative to means right now. So buying a big vehicle isn't a big crutch for people. So having big, safe, high vehicles seems kind of like a priority. And to me, like, that just means Tesla kind of should, get this Model 3 out the door and start, before people start buying up all these other cars, get their Model Y in front of people and start talking about the minibus and the truck and all the other stuff that they've got in the pipeline.
Yeah. They should unveil the pickup truck and the Model Y at the same time. And even if the pickup truck is like a year later or something like that in production, just start taking reservation, have diamond drawn up for electric pickups, and then Ford and GM and all those guys going to wake up and say, oh, if 100,000 people just reserved a Tesla electric pickup truck, maybe I should put another $100 million in my pickup truck program or something like that.
Yeah.
Finally, real quick, before we go, Volvo. So if you remember a few months back, last year basically, Volvo made a big announcement that they're going all electric, and everyone was really excited, especially in the media. But what they were just saying is that all their new models is going to have an electric motor, so that can mean an hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, or a BEV. They clarified the situation, and now in terms of all electric vehicles, because we didn't know for sure all electric vehicles, we knew that they have 2 in the work, but how big is going to be in terms of volume? Now they say that 50% of the volume is going to be all electric by 2025.
So that's not 50% of their models. It's 50% of the cars that come off the line.
Exactly. So that's a very more precise commitment, and then also more aggressive than most automakers, most established one that already have an existing gas-powered vehicle business. It's similar to the announcement from Porsche, which has a similar plan. Most automakers, 2025, they're talking about 25%, something like that. So it's certainly more aggressive, but at Electrek, of course, we think it's just not aggressive enough, because the
Right.
EV revolution is coming a lot quicker, I think.
Well, as soon as that inflection point happens, nobody's going to want a gas car, as you said in the post. Like once electric vehicles are the same price as gas cars, once there's the charging infrastructure around, like why on earth would you buy a gas car if all the pain points are gone?
Yeah.
Charging is everywhere and faster. If you're getting these 150 to 350 kilowatt chargers everywhere, you don't have the gas tank in your garage. Like there's no reason, there would be no reason to have a gas car, and all the rationale that people have for gas cars just kind of fall away once the infrastructure and the costs come down.
Yeah. All you have will see all the difference. I'm starting to talk French. People, I'm tired. I think it's gonna be the end. It's you have more option. If you have like right now, you still have limited option in terms of actual models. If you're really specific to one kind of models, there's some people just buy Golfs. They just buy VW Golf. So if you have a good electric option that they can actually produce, because the Golf, of course, is a very limited production right now. It's hard to get your hands on one. So if the availability is there, your specific desired in terms of car design is there and everything, it's just a no-brainer. So that's gonna be pretty much it for us this week for the Electrek Podcast. We want to thank our sponsor this week again, Wonder Capital. You can go to wondercapital.com/electrek to invest in solar. Also, a big thanks to our Patreon supporters. We have now almost 140 of them. That helps a lot if you want to go contribute. Patreon.com/electrek. And that's pretty much it for us. Have a good week, and we'll see you next Friday, same time, same place. Bye-bye.